If someone ever offered to keep an eye on you, and that offer felt comforting at first, this story will feel familiar. A quick favor. If you have ever felt underestimated by people close to you, support this story wherever you listen to it. Someone out there needs the warning. My name is Harold Hal Mercer, 70 years old, American, retired line mechanic from a parts plant outside Dayton, Ohio. 4 decades around machines trained my brain to notice patterns the moment they start drifting off normal. The tiniest vibration, the smallest shift in sound, a sequence that repeats when it should not. Machines fail in patterns. People do too. My wife, Nora, passed in early February. Pneumonia, fast and unforgiving. One week, she was making grocery lists and laughing at a sitcom rerun. The next week, she was fighting for air in a hospital room that never got truly dark, because even at midnight, a row of monitors kept glowing like tiny moons. After the funeral, my house became a museum of her habits. Tea tins lined in neat rows. Hand towels folded tight. A favorite mug left on the counter, washed and dried, then placed back in the same spot as if her hand might reach for it any moment. The silence did not arrive all at once. It seeped in, then filled everything. Grief did strange things to time. A day could move like wet cement, then a whole week could vanish, leaving only the memory of a chair that stayed empty at the table. Nights were the hardest. The bed felt too large, like a field after harvest. My mind replayed every ordinary moment I had taken for granted. A laugh over burnt toast. A hand on my arm during the evening news. The quiet comfort of sharing the same room without needing words. Our kids lived out of state. Our son, Ethan, had moved to North Carolina for a job that paid better than Ohio ever did. A new baby in the house and a calendar full of sleep deprivation. Our daughter, Melissa, lived in Arizona and ran a department at a hospital, the kind of role where her phone never stopped vibrating. They loved me. They checked in. They were not close enough to see small shifts. That distance became a doorway. Her name was Diane Ralston. 58. Perfect porch. Perfect yard. Perfect timing with holiday decorations. A smile that never missed a neighbor. The kind of person who showed up with a ladder when the wind knocked a branch onto someone's roof. The kind of person everyone praised at block parties. The perfect neighbor. 2 days after the funeral, Diane appeared with a casserole in a foil pan and a sympathy card written in neat, careful handwriting. The hug lasted just long enough to feel real. The kindness felt like a rope thrown to a man in deep water. The help continued. Trash bins rolled back up my driveway without anyone requesting it. Salt scattered on the sidewalk before I woke up. A text each evening, lights on, heat steady, mail delivered, everything okay. At first, that kind of attention felt like community, a reminder that not every room in life stays empty forever. Diane knew how to be present without seeming loud. Diane knew how to pick the exact moments when a person's pride weakened. A week later, Diane began offering rides. The pharmacy, the grocery store, the hardware aisle where I still wandered out of habit, fingers reaching for bolts and tape I did not need. Driving did not scare me, but the fog of grief made even simple errands feel heavier. Diane framed the offer as rest. No pressure, only convenience. One ride led to another. Diane learned my routines. She learned which pharmacy I used, which brand of heartburn medicine sat on my shelf, which aisle I always walked first in the grocery store. Diane learned my doctor's name because my appointment reminder card sat visible on the kitchen counter one morning. The card vanished later. A small absence that could be an accident or a test. A helpful suggestion arrived after that. Consolidate appointments. Use Diane's recommended clinic. Use Diane's recommended counselor. Use Diane's family friend for home safety checks. The suggestion sounded like care. The suggestion felt like a hand sliding closer to a wallet. Then, small things started falling out of rhythm. The interruptions began around week 3. A knock on my door 5 minutes before Ethan usually called. A quick check-in arriving exactly as Melissa's number lit up my phone. Not every time, just often enough to feel like a pattern, just rare enough to keep plausible deniability. The calls grew shorter. My kids felt the lack of privacy. They adjusted, calling less often, trying to avoid bothering. The distance widened. Diane began acting as a message carrier. A note about Melissa's travel schedule filtered through Diane's words instead of Melissa's voice. A reminder that Ethan was overwhelmed with the baby, framed as a warning not to expect much. A narrative built from small assumptions that leaned in one direction. Hal should not rely on anyone but Diane. The first true alarm arrived, wrapped in a compliment. A remark about my house's value. A remark about how smart Nora and I had been to buy before prices climbed. A remark about how many older neighbors had been forced to sell because they did not plan well. Planning. That word carries a double edge. Planning can be love. Planning can also be a crowbar disguised as good intentions. A folder appeared on my kitchen counter one afternoon. Local senior resources, home safety checklists, medical release forms just in case, a brochure for a trusted caregiver network tied to Diane's church ministry, glossy paper, smiling faces, a promise of peace. Diane framed it like comfort, a clean path forward, a way to remove stress. Stress was not the target, control was. The mailbox became unpredictable. Some days it sat empty when it should not. Other days it contained only circulars. Important mail arrived late. A bank notice about online access updates arrived already opened, the envelope torn with a clean edge like someone practiced. No one had a reason to be inside my mail, unless someone believed my life belonged to them now. A new inconvenience arrived with a sweet face. Diane offered to organize my kitchen because grief can make the mind tired, and tired minds misplace things. Diane moved through drawers with confidence, touching everything like it already belonged to her. After that organizing, my spare house key vanished from the hook by the back door. The hook looked empty, then looked normal again once my brain tried to rationalize it. A spare key can disappear in 1,000 innocent ways, especially in a house full of grief. That same week, my checkbook went missing from the drawer where Nora always kept it. The drawer stayed half open one morning, like someone had searched in a hurry. The checkbook returned 2 days later, tucked beneath a stack of coupons in the kitchen junk drawer, a place it never belonged. Diane's tone stayed light when she noticed me searching. A friendly laugh about memory and stress. A gentle suggestion that it might be time to let someone help with finances, because money mistakes can be dangerous. Money mistakes were not my danger. Diane was. A package from Ethan vanished one Thursday. A framed photo of the new baby. The delivery alert appeared on my phone. The porch stayed empty. A second package disappeared the next week. A sweater Melissa sent with vitamins and a handwritten note. Tracking marked delivered. My porch stayed empty again. Diane arrived that evening with a sympathetic expression and a smooth explanation about porch thieves in the area. The concern looked sincere, and the solution arrived instantly. A suggestion followed. Use Diane's address for deliveries to keep things safe. A safer porch, a better system, a neighborly upgrade. A person does not lose packages and immediately hand over the pipeline of incoming mail unless a different pipeline already exists. A refusal came easily, a calm smile, a firm no. Diane's warmth stayed, but it felt thinner afterward, like a lamp turned down. A new layer arrived through the neighborhood association. A cheerful newsletter praised checking on vulnerable residents and celebrated Diane's community spirit with a photo of Diane handing groceries to an older man down the street. The man's posture looked tense, not comforted. His eyes looked like mine felt. That older man lived 3 houses over. Mr. Alvarez, 82, a Vietnam veteran who still wore his cap to mow the lawn. Mr. Alvarez had become quieter over the past year. Diane often walked him to his mailbox. Diane often carried his groceries. Diane often stood on his porch in long conversations while he stared at the ground like someone trying to disappear in daylight. One afternoon, I watched Mr. Alvarez hand Diane an envelope. Diane tucked it into her purse quickly, then glanced down the street as if checking for witnesses. Mr. Alvarez leaned on his cane and looked smaller than usual. That scene stayed in my head. It felt like seeing a machine belt slipping. Small at first, but dangerous if ignored. Then the phone call from Adult Protective Services arrived. A report had been filed about my well-being. Concerns about isolation. Concerns about confusion. Concerns about medication management. Concerns about safety living alone. None of those concerns came from my kids. None of those concerns came from my doctor. They came from a caring neighbor. The APS worker remained professional and polite. A routine check, a home visit, a list of questions. The visit felt like a warning wrapped in official language. Food in the house. Heat working. Bills paid. Medication organized. My answers stayed clear. My documents stayed tidy. My mind stayed sharp. The worker left with no action needed. Diane arrived 20 minutes later with another casserole and a smile already prepared, relief already rehearsed. The timing landed too neatly to ignore. A line followed, delivered as concern. It was good that authorities checked in, just to be safe, just to make sure no one was taking advantage. No one was taking advantage, except the person arranging checks. Sleep stayed away that night. Streetlight stripes cut across the living room wall. The museum silence felt heavier. The missing packages, the opened mail, the APS call, the interruptions during family calls, the folder of forms, the spare key, the checkbook, the envelope in Diane's purse. The pattern formed a shape. A name surfaced too, someone who might see patterns in a different way. Victor Lane lived across the street. 74, retired mail carrier. A man who still walked his dog at the same time every morning like a habit carved into bone. Victor and I had nodded at each other for years, 2 older guys sharing the same quiet block. The next morning, I crossed the street and knocked on Victor's door. A cup of coffee later, Victor's eyes narrowed in a way I recognized. The same look I used when a machine's vibration changed by half a degree. Victor had noticed Diane standing near mailboxes longer than needed. Victor had noticed Diane checking delivery schedules on her phone. Victor had noticed Diane asking other neighbors whether their kids visited much. Victor had also noticed something else. A stack of returned mail in Diane's recycling bin one day. Envelopes with different addresses. A detail most people would miss. A detail a mail carrier never overlooks. Victor agreed to help with documentation. Not heroics, documentation, timing, evidence. The next morning, a test began. A decoy package, ordered online, shipped to my address. Not valuable, not dramatic. A box filled with old magazines and a cheap kitchen timer. A label added on the side, medical supplies. That label mattered. Predators chase fear, not truth. A simple motion camera went into the front window, angled at the porch. Victor helped position it so glare from the streetlight would not wash out the image at night. Delivery alert, 12:17 p.m. Driver arrived, 12:31 p.m. Box sat alone. At 12:49 p.m., Diane appeared. No casserole, no smile, no attempt at coincidence. A direct walk up my steps. A quick glance down the street. Hands reached for the box with the smooth confidence of someone handling something already claimed. The box vanished into her arms. Diane turned and crossed her lawn like my porch belonged to her. The footage saved automatically. The perfect neighbor was stealing. The next steps required caution. Caution keeps predators from pivoting too soon. A call went to Ethan first, not to panic him, but to anchor him in reality before Diane could poison him with more stories about confusion and decline. Ethan listened, stunned, then angry, then focused. A call went to Melissa next. The reaction arrived fast. A cold clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from hospital work, where paperwork shapes outcomes and manipulators exploit systems. A call went to an elder law attorney recommended through County Senior Services, Mariah Jensen. Sharp reputation. No patience for exploitation. A voice that cut through noise and aimed at solutions. A call went to the bank fraud department. A call went to the postal inspector office because opened mail and missing packages do not stay neighborhood drama once documentation exists. Mariah moved with precision. A checklist arrived, strict and immediate. Lock down finances, redirect mail, freeze credit, enable multi-step verification. Document every contact. Avoid direct confrontation without backup. A P.O. box opened that afternoon. Bank statements rerouted. Passwords changed. A trusted contact added on financial accounts. Ethan. A new backup phone number added for verification. Melissa. A medical evaluation scheduled with my longtime doctor, not through any neighbor resource, to preempt future claims of incompetence. Another detail mattered, my phone. Diane had touched it more than once, helping adjust volume or fixing a setting. Melissa warned about simple sabotage. A quick check revealed my phone had Do Not Disturb enabled during certain hours, including the window when Ethan normally called. A helpful setting, disguised as convenience, that actually cut me off. That setting changed immediately. A new passcode went on the phone. Diane's access vanished. Diane noticed boundary changes almost immediately. The next morning brought a knock at 7:05 a.m., the kind of time that feels like dominance, not kindness. Diane's face carried a carefully arranged concern and a trace of irritation that barely stayed hidden. A question about missing packages. A suggestion about letting Diane hold deliveries again. A reminder about how authorities worry when seniors live alone. The rope tightened again. My response stayed calm and brief. No arguments, no emotion. Cameras watched, notes recorded. Diane's smile thinned for a fraction of a second. The eyes sharpened. Later that day, Melissa's number lit up my phone during her work hours. Stress colored her voice. A message had arrived from Diane. Urgent tone. Hal refusing help. Hal confused. Hal pushing away family. Hal needing intervention. Intervention is a noble-sounding word. Intervention can also be a crowbar. Melissa and Ethan made a plan. One of them needed to show up in person. Distance was Diane's best ally. Melissa booked a flight for the coming weekend. Diane learned within a day. That timing mattered. Knowledge arrived too quickly. It traveled through access to my calendar, or my mail, or my phone, or all three. That night, a second report hit APS. This one claimed a fall. This one claimed bruises. This one claimed cognitive decline worsening. The report triggered a faster response. A PS arrived the next morning with a supervisor. A police officer arrived too, standard protocol when uncertainty exists. The visit became a measured inspection. No bruises, no fall, stable gait, organized medications, clean home, food in the fridge. The supervisor's tone remained neutral, but the notes were not. Multiple reports, escalating urgency, no evidence. A phrase appeared in the supervisor's system: potential malicious reporting. That phrase matters later. Diane returned 20 minutes after APS left, carrying groceries and rehearsed relief. The same timing, the same theater, the same mask. The officer's patrol car remained down the street at the time, visible enough. Diane's eyes flickered toward it and back, a brief crack in the perfect expression. Melissa arrived that weekend. The visit stayed calm, no confrontation. Only observation with adult eyes trained to see systems. Melissa noticed opened mail in a wastebasket. Melissa noticed Diane's interruptions. Melissa noticed Diane's car parked across the street twice in one day with no reason. Melissa also noticed something more subtle: Diane's habit of positioning herself between me and the door, between me and my phone, between me and my own decisions. The weekend became a controlled test. A call went to Ethan on speakerphone. A second phone recorded the room. The porch camera recorded outside. Within 5 minutes, Diane knocked. Timing landed like a stamp. Not coincidence. Surveillance. Melissa opened the door and stepped outside, blocking Diane's view into the living room. Diane's face shifted. Surprise, then a smooth smile, then a thin edge of calculation. Melissa kept the boundary simple and direct. No more unannounced visits, no more mail handling, no more contact with family without Hal's request, no more involvement with any paperwork, forms, or care networks. Diane's smile froze. The eyes cooled. A line arrived from Diane's mouth, framed as concern but shaped like threat. Authorities worry when family refuses community support, and the neighborhood would not want a tragedy. Tragedy. A match near gasoline. Melissa remained steady. Any further reports would be treated as harassment. Any further entry onto the property would be treated as trespass. Any further contact with family would be documented and forwarded to counsel. Diane left with perfect posture and perfect hair, but the perfection looked strained now. That night, escalation arrived. 2:14 a.m. Motion on the porch camera. A silhouette approached the side gate. A figure moved along the wall toward the back door. Not a lost dog, not a teenager, a person with familiarity and intent. The back door handle turned. A key met the lock. The lock resisted. Locks had been changed 3 days earlier through Mariah's recommendation, using a company outside Diane's orbit. The figure froze, scanned the eaves for cameras, then moved toward the kitchen window and tested the latch. The back door sensor chimed softly inside. Not loud enough for neighbors. Loud enough for Melissa and me. Police arrived within 8 minutes. The figure moved quickly toward the sidewalk, trying to blend into darkness. A flashlight beam caught the face near the curb. Diane, coat on, no groceries, no smile, no casserole. Only a neighbor with a key and a story. Diane attempted a wellness narrative. Fear for my safety. A belief I had fallen and needed help. The officer watched the camera footage on Melissa's phone. The officer looked at the door. The officer looked at the key. The key did not fit. The timing did not fit. The story did not fit. A trespass warning was issued on the spot. A report filed. Footage attached. The perfect neighbor became a documented threat overnight. The next morning brought paperwork instead of emotion. Mariah filed for a protective order. Melissa signed a statement. A P.S. added the malicious reporting note. The police report created a trail that could not vanish. Then the larger truth surfaced, the part that turned my stomach colder than midnight air. Mariah ran a deeper search. Not just public records, but civil claims, licensing references, eviction histories, and caregiver-adjacent networks. Criminal records remained clean because careful predators avoid criminal charges by living inside gray zones. A pattern appeared instead. 3 counties in 8 years. A series of older households each time, often after a spouse's death. 2 civil disputes involving misunderstood loans and gift expectations. One case where Diane had been named a beneficiary on an elderly man's policy, later reversed after legal pressure. A network existed too, a small group tied to a church care ministry, rotating volunteers, meal trains, rides to appointments, gentle pressure toward paperwork, then a sudden emergency once enough influence existed. Not a flashy ring, a soft one, the kind that hides behind prayers and casseroles. Diane was not a lone wolf. Diane was a method. The protective order hearing arrived 2 weeks later. The courtroom smelled like old carpet and printer toner. Diane entered wearing a cardigan and an expression that looked fragile on purpose. A church friend arrived behind her, ready to look supportive. The performance aimed for one conclusion. Diane as helper, Hal as confused old man, family as distant and neglectful. Mariah dismantled that performance with timestamps, porch video of package theft, tracking logs of missing deliveries, bank fraud attempt time window, a PS report history and the supervisor note. Police report from 2:14 a.m., a letter from my doctor confirming cognitive function and independence. A statement from Melissa describing Diane's interference during family calls in the attempt to control communication. The judge reviewed the footage in silence. A simple ruling followed. Protective order granted, no contact, no entry onto property, no third-party contact to family, no interference with mail or deliveries, no attempt to represent Hal's interests to institutions. Diane's eyes hardened for a moment. Not anger, something worse. Calculation adjusting to a new obstacle. The perfect neighbor smile returned as Diane exited, a final attempt to look harmless. That smile became meaningless once the order existed on paper. The neighborhood board could not ignore the protective order for long. Diane had built her image inside that board for years. She had organized porch decor contests, holiday light votes, and safety reminders that looked harmless to everyone reading them. The board loved neatness, and Diane always looked neat. Mariah requested a meeting with the board's attorney present. Not a shouting match, not gossip, not a feud. A risk briefing. The meeting took place in the small community room near the clubhouse, the kind of room that smelled like carpet cleaner and stale coffee. A folding table sat in the center with bottled water lined up like props. A framed photo of the neighborhood entrance sign hung on the wall, glossy and proud. Diane arrived early, already seated, already composed. A cardigan, a folder. A smile calibrated to appear gentle. 2 board members sat near her, leaning slightly in her direction, the posture of people who had already chosen a side without realizing it. Mariah entered with a portable screen and a laptop. Melissa and I followed. Victor sat in the back row, arms crossed, quiet support. Mariah began with the timeline. No emotion, no speculation, the kind of methodical order a mechanic respects. Opened mail documented by photographs and date stamps. Missing packages with tracking confirmations. Porch footage of the decoy box leaving my steps in Diane's hands. A PS reports, 3 in total, each escalating in urgency, each lacking evidence, with the supervisor note marking potential malicious reporting. The 2:14 a.m. entry attempt, captured on camera, followed by the trespass warning and police report. Bank fraud attempts flagged by the bank, with location data aligning to the same radius as Diane's home. The board members shifted in their seats as the pattern took shape. The two who leaned toward Diane began leaning away, subtle at first, then more obvious once the porch footage played again on the screen. There was a difference between a neighbor story and a neighbor video. Diane attempted to push a new narrative. Concern, confusion, fear. A portrait of a lonely old man, misunderstanding help. The voice stayed soft, the posture stayed humble, the eyes searched for sympathy like a person trained to find it. Mariah kept the focus on liability. The neighborhood association had promoted Diane as a volunteer resource in newsletters. The association had effectively amplified a person now connected to documented mail theft and harassment. If Diane approached another resident in that role, and harm followed, the association would be exposed. That was the word that changed the room. Exposed. The board's attorney requested copies of every report and every video. Mariah provided them on a drive and a printed packet, indexed and labeled. The attorney's tone remained professional, but the shift in temperature was obvious. By the end of the meeting, the board agreed to 3 changes. No mention of individual wellness volunteers in newsletters without background review. A formal ban on Diane participating in any association-sponsored wellness activities. A notice to residents about mail security and scam awareness, written without naming me, written without naming Diane, but written clearly enough to warn anyone paying attention. Diane's smile did not crack. It simply became smaller. A perfect mask adjusting to a new reality. After that meeting, something unexpected happened. Mr. Alvarez knocked on my door, not Diane walking him over. Mr. Alvarez alone. His hands trembled slightly as he held his veteran cap. His eyes stayed on the ground at first, then lifted toward mine like a man forcing himself to face shame. A sentence arrived, raw and exhausted. Diane had pushed help on him too. Bills, forms, a loan for groceries that turned into a demand for repayment with interest that no friend would require. Copies of his identification for the church records. A change to his insurance contact for emergencies. Every step framed as care. Every step pulling him farther from control. Mr. Alvarez had felt uncomfortable for months. Mr. Alvarez had felt trapped for weeks. Mr. Alvarez had felt foolish for days. He had watched police lights near my house at 2:14 a.m. He had heard the protective order rumor, then seen the board meeting notice. The mask had slipped, and the fear he carried finally had a place to go. Mariah helped him too. A separate report, a separate timeline, more weight on the scale. Diane's methods no longer belonged to shadows. They belonged to records. Records travel. Records survive moving trucks. The weeks after the hearing felt like a new education in how predators react when denied. Direct access vanished, so indirect pressure rose. An anonymous neighborhood email circulated warning about elder neglect and families that abandon their parents. No names, plenty of implications. A smear designed to isolate me socially and make neighbors hesitate before waving or visiting. Mariah responded with a cease and desist letter tied to the protective order. Copies went to the neighborhood board and to Diane's church leadership. Not drama, liability. The church leadership did not publicly condemn Diane. Institutions avoid public shame. But the care ministry changed its rules the following month. No volunteer contact without family notification, no handling of mail, no encouragement of financial documents, No private emergency planning meetings in seniors' homes without family notified. Rules change when risk becomes visible. Diane did not vanish yet. The first attempt at circumvention arrived through a new helper. A younger woman appeared one afternoon at the end of my driveway. Friendly posture, soft smile, a bag of muffins. The woman introduced herself as Kara, a new neighbor from 2 streets over, just trying to be friendly, just trying to help. The timing was too neat, the style too similar, the muffins too familiar. Kara's eyes drifted toward my porch camera. Kara's questions drifted toward my kids. Kara's language drifted toward paperwork and support. Mariah advised a simple response. No engagement, no invitation, documentation of contact. Report to court as a protective order circumvention attempt. Kara did not return after that. 2 days later, a new package vanished again. This time, a pair of shoes Ethan ordered for me, because my work boots were done and my feet deserved comfort. Delivery marked complete. Porch empty. The porch camera captured the driver leaving. It also captured a gloved hand entering the frame 5 minutes later, reaching from the side walkway, snatching the box, then retreating out of view. No face on camera. A method, a test. The mail theft was back, now more careful. The postal inspector took the lead at that point. Mail theft across multiple incidents becomes a federal interest quickly, especially with documentation. A postal inspector visited my house and reviewed the camera footage. The inspector spoke in calm terms about patterns, repeated targeting, likely someone within close proximity, likely someone tracking delivery timing, likely someone with a motive tied to identity access. The inspector placed a controlled delivery on the schedule, a decoy with a signature requirement and a unique mark inside. The controlled delivery arrived 3 days later. The box sat on the porch. A neighbor would not touch it if innocent. A predator sees bait and cannot resist. A figure appeared within 12 minutes. Gloves, hat, a hoodie pulled low. The figure moved fast, grabbed the box and stepped back toward the side walkway. A postal inspector vehicle rolled into view at the curb. A second vehicle arrived behind it. The figure froze for a fraction of a second, then ran. Footsteps pounded down the sidewalk. A turn toward the corner. A stumble. A body tackled onto the grass by a federal agent. The hood slipped back. Not Diane. A man, mid-30s, lean, nervous eyes. A stranger to me, but not to the system. The man carried a stack of key tags in his pocket and a small notebook with addresses written in tight handwriting. The name later arrived through Mariah. Raymond Pike. Not a violent criminal, a courier, an errand runner, a paid set of hands for people who prefer distance. Raymond's phone became evidence. Messages existed, names existed, payment transfers existed. Diane's name appeared in those messages, not as Diane Ralston, but as DR and Church Lady. The perfect neighbor had evolved from stealing herself to hiring others because the protective order placed her too close to the spotlight. The criminal case expanded. A detective from the county elder fraud unit contacted Mariah. Diane's name appeared in other files too. Not enough for charges before. Enough now, with a courier caught in the act, messages tying back, and a history of APS harassment. Diane reacted again by trying to move away. A moving truck arrived at Diane's house that weekend. Curtains drawn, yard decorations removed. The perfect yard turned bare within hours. Predators move when light turns on. The move did not erase the trail. Raymond cooperated quickly, because people like Raymond do not want to carry charges for people like Diane. Cooperation reduces consequence. Cooperation also reveals networks. A list of addresses surfaced. A list of older residents. a list of helpers connected to a ministry that rotated neighborhoods like fishing spots. The police contacted several addresses on the list. More stories surfaced, similar patterns, packages missing. Mail opened. Concern reports to APS. Forms pushed across kitchen counters. A warm smile turning cold once refusal appeared. One couple described a neighbor volunteer who insisted on helping with bills, then an unexplained credit card opening in the husband's name. A widow described a support group friend who encouraged beneficiary changes for simplicity. A veteran described a church helper who built trust for months, then attempted to move him into a facility with paperwork. Different faces, same language, same rhythm, same method. My story was not unique. That knowledge created anger, then purpose. Anger alone is a fire. Purpose becomes steel. Mariah and Melissa helped build a community response, a workshop hosted at the local library, a handout with clear red flags, a phone tree for seniors, a simple rule: help never requires secrecy. A second rule: urgent paperwork always deserves a second opinion. The library room filled with older residents and their adult children. Not panic, education, not paranoia, awareness. Victor stood near the back and watched faces change as people recognized details from their own lives. A woman in her 60s gripped her purse tighter when the topic of opened mail came up. A man with a veteran cap stared at the floor when care ministries came up, like a memory had resurfaced. The most useful part of the workshop was not the list of red flags. It was permission to trust discomfort. When something feels off, it usually is. Months passed. The legal case moved forward steadily. Diane's move out of the neighborhood did not stop subpoenas. Raymond's phone records did not vanish. The postal inspector's evidence did not weaken. Then the final twist arrived, the one Diane had been circling from the beginning. A guardianship petition appeared at the courthouse. Not filed by Diane directly, filed by a concerned friend connected to the ministry, filed with affidavits claiming Hal suffered cognitive decline, refused help, mismanaged finances, and required emergency protection. Emergency guardianship is one of the most dangerous legal tools in elder exploitation because it can move faster than families can respond. A judge can grant temporary authority quickly when fear is painted well enough. The petition attempted to use my earlier APS reports as history. The petition attached notes from a counselor connected to Diane's church, not my physician, describing confusion and paranoia. The petition framed my kids as absent and negligent, a crowbar disguised as rescue. Mariah responded within hours. A motion to dismiss, a request for sanctions for abuse of process, a packet of evidence, the protective order, the trespass report, the mail theft case, the postal inspector documentation, the courier arrest, the messages linking back to Diane, my doctor's evaluation, and statements from Melissa and Ethan describing Diane's interference and harassment. A separate evaluation was scheduled with a neutral specialist approved by the court, not connected to any ministry or neighbor. The evaluation documented capacity and independence. The hearing arrived 10 days later. The courtroom felt colder than the protective order hearing, because this one aimed at my autonomy itself. My heart beat steady, not from fear, but from the stubbornness Nora used to tease me about. The kind of stubbornness that kept machines running and kept my family fed for decades. Mariah placed evidence in front of the judge like bolts on a workbench, one by one, labeled, timed, verified. The petitioners attempted to frame fear, concern, protection. The language sounded gentle. The intent behind it did not. The judge reviewed the evidence and focused on one crucial fact. A non-relative neighbor had been caught stealing packages and attempting entry at 2:14 a.m., followed by a courier arrest tied to the same network, followed by a protective order, followed by an emergency guardianship petition supported by people connected to that network. The pattern did not look like care. The pattern looked like predation. The judge denied the petition. The denial carried a warning. The warning carried weight. Any future filing without new, independent medical evidence would be treated as harassment and potential exploitation. That day, something lifted. Not grief. Grief stays and reshapes itself. Something else lifted, the sensation of being watched by someone who believed my life belonged to them. A final letter arrived from the district attorney's office months later. Charges connected to the mail theft, identity fraud attempts, and harassment moved forward against multiple individuals, including Diane. No dramatic courtroom scene occurred in my living room. Real justice moves like slow gears. The perfect neighbor did not get the ending she wanted. A different ending formed instead. Ethan visited that summer with the baby, a tiny child with warm cheeks and curious eyes. A new laugh inside my living room, a sound that pushed back the museum silence Nora left behind. Melissa visited again in the fall, not as a rescuer but as family. The visits were not fueled by fear anymore. They were fueled by time, the kind of time Diane tried to steal. The neighborhood changed too. A senior safety circle formed, not built on suspicion, built on consent and clarity. Friendly check-ins handled openly. Transparent boundaries. Clear rules, no mail handling, no financial advice, no paperwork pressure, no isolation tactics, no private emergency planning meetings in seniors' homes without family notified. The handout on the library table carried a phrase in bold: kindness without boundaries becomes control. Nora would have liked that line. Nora valued kindness. Nora valued steel, too. The perfect neighbor taught a hard truth. Predators do not always arrive with threats. Sometimes they arrive with casseroles. Sometimes they arrive with a smile that never slips until the locks change.